Hey, what's up guys, and welcome back to another Reddit Stories video. And this video will be kind of different than usual because this will be focusing on one genre of a video or stories. And so this will be scary ocean stories, and it'll just be a great video. All the stories I have picked out are just really great and super interesting, so you'll want to stick around. And this video is great if you just want to study to it, sleep, watch it, listen, whatever you want. But stick around. They're all great stories. And also, please subscribe to the channel. It's the channel's goal to hit 500,000 subscribers before the end of the year. And I think we can do it. So please subscribe to the channel. And all right, anyways, without further ado, let's get into some scary ocean stories. This video is sponsored by Manscaped, the global men's lifestyle brand that is revolutionizing the landscape of men's grooming. With the Lawnmower 5.0 Ultra, they've taken grooming precision to a whole new level with their next-gen dual skin-safe blade heads, now accompanied by an upgraded trimmer blade and interchangeable foil blade for enhanced performance. First, their upgraded trimmer blade features longer, wider, and rounded teeth that cut through hair with ease. Tough on hair, yet incredibly gentle on the skin. It's a precision powerhouse, but here comes the real showstopper. The foil blade. Crafted to transcend the boundaries of your typical trim achieved with the trimmer blade, this foil blade is designed to leave you with a finish that's irresistibly sleek and utterly bare. Now, I know what you're thinking. How does this dual blade system really stack up? Let's break it down. Start your trimming session using the trimmer blade, then easily pop it off and attach the foil blade to get down to skin level. Think of it as a grooming tag team match. The trimmer blade enters the ring with its clean-cut moves, and then the foil blade swoops in for the final of unbeatable smoothness. The Lawnmower 5.0 Ultra also has a bigger LED light and introduces a dual temperature feature thoughtfully engineered to embrace and flatter multiple skin tones. Those hard-to-reach areas? Consider them perfectly lit and ready for their close-up. If you're a part of the OG Manscaped fam, this trimmer is a tribute to the classics, upholding the same features that we've all come to love: a rechargeable Li-ion battery, RPM technology for top-notch performance, a travel lock for seamless portability, USB-C charging, a comprehensive 3-level battery life indicator, and the best part, it's still waterproof. And guess what? It doesn't stop there. When you purchase the Performance Package 5.0 Ultra, you'll receive 2 free gifts. First up, we've got the Boxers 2.0. These are not your regular boxers. They're designed for ultimate comfort and style and come with a jewel poucher. Manscaped also threw in their Shed 2.0. It's like your grooming command center, a place to keep all your grooming gear organized and ready to roll. Join the 10 million men worldwide who've put their confidence in Manscaped for all things grooming and hygiene. Head over to manscaped.com and get your hands on the Performance Package 5.0 Ultra today. When you use my promo code SNOOK, you'll get 20% off plus free international shipping plus 2 free gifts with promo code SNOOK at manscaped.com. Trust me when I say this, fellas, your balls will thank you. Now back into the video. If you see a searchlight too soon after capsizing in the North Pacific Ocean, hide. A few years ago, I was working as a deckhand on an Alaskan fishing boat. From a young age, my parents instilled in me a strong work ethic. They always said hard work leads to greater returns, so I naturally gravitated towards a career that shared that philosophy. Alaskan fishing added high risk to that equation, and in return, the rewards were even sweeter. I couldn't imagine doing anything else and planned on working my way up to captain one day. This story takes place during my 5th crabbing season. By then, I knew the ropes, I was familiar with the waters, and had witnessed a few deaths firsthand. I thought I was prepared for anything. I was dead wrong. We were a crew of 15, myself included, when the season began. That number would be halved by the time we returned to shore, and I would be left incapable of setting foot anywhere near the ocean ever again. I was sailing on the Seaward Sarah, a vessel that was getting a little long in the tooth but was known for her reliability. Since she'd passed her safety inspection earlier that year, I had no concerns as we left port for the cold waters of the North Pacific Ocean. It was exhilarating to be on the sea again, with the fresh salty breeze and waters so vast you couldn't see anything but blue for miles around. Spirits were high, and the excitement of starting off a new journey was electric. We always hold a party on first and last nights. It was tradition. Even the captain would join in and dance and sing and drink. We noticed the first sign of trouble 2 days into the journey. The seaward Sarah was listing on her starboard side. It wasn't at a dangerous angle, but after consulting the ship's engineer, the captain determined it was safe to proceed farther into the North Pacific Ocean. He planned on balancing her out once we started loading crabs into the cargo decks. We are overfill the port cargo and underfill the starboard. I didn't question the plan. It seemed reasonable, and besides, I was just a deckhand. The captain could piss in my mouth, tell me it was wine, and I'd smile and agree. That's the way it works at sea. I grew more concerned as the voyage went on. The list worsened over the course of the next week. It went from a barely noticeable incline to my calves burning from straining against the pull of gravity towards starboard. That's when the captain started making a lot of calls. I couldn't hear what was going on, but I could see him shouting into the receiver, his face getting redder and angrier as the days wore on. I was told he was cursing everyone from the ship manufacturer to the inspectors to the contractors who'd last done repair work on our hull. I was told it was business as usual. One evening, when most of us were gathered in the dining hall, holding our plates and glasses to keep them from sliding down the table, the captain burst in and announced we were turning around. Our reactions were mixed, with some experiencing relief and others disappointment. No one knew what this meant for our wages, or whether the repairs could be done in time to get back at sea before the end of the crab season. Me? I was one of the ones who was relieved by the news. The vast ocean I'd been yearning for months had become progressively more unsettling as the ship tilted. I became keenly aware just how far away I was from dry land, from safety. This place I found freeing suddenly felt like a cage, and I wanted out. I felt the seaward Sarah turn as I headed back to the crew quarters and used the wall for support. The combination of the dime turn and the ship's tilt were terrible for my equilibrium. I needed to lay down and let myself adjust. I don't know what would have happened if the storm hadn't hit that later that night. Would the seaward Sarah have limped home safely? Would she have rolled over along the way? I'll never know now, because the storm did hit, one that seemed to come out of nowhere, barely being caught by the radar before its waves and rain started pelting the ship with the fury of an angry sea god. The seaward Sarah groaned in pain as our list worsened even more. Doors flew open, objects fell and hit me as I staggered up the hull and towards the deck. I didn't realize just how bad it had gotten until I felt my feet touch the wall, and realized the wall was becoming the floor. I was still inside when I heard the call to the abandoned ship. I was bruised, groggy, and disoriented. Enough water had gotten in from somewhere that I was also soaked. I felt a pair of hands grab me by the shoulder and usher me forward when I stopped to take a breath. I know at some point I donned a life vest, but I couldn't tell you when or how I got it on. All I remember is the surreal sensation of the world changing directions inside the ship, and the sight of tall waves illuminated by lighting outside once more. Thunder drowned out the screams of my shipmates, but I could see them scrambling to launch a lifeboat. I threw myself towards them, but before I could catch a handhold, I felt a wall of ice-cold water drag me into the railing. A second wave, the reaction to its action, reached over the rail and pulled me into the water. The pain was unbearable. Not only had I been tossed around like a rag doll, but the water felt like I'd rolled into a vat of quicksand made of sharp needles. I didn't know which side was up and which was down, but thankfully, the life vest lifted me back to the turbulent surface. The water had gotten into my ears, muffling the sound of the storm, and I tried to flail my arms, hoping for rescue, but I couldn't lift them. I couldn't stop threading water long enough. This hell went on for longer than I care to reflect on. I just know wave after wave pulled me under, but the jacket always brought me back up long enough to catch my breath. When I close my eyes, even years later, I can still feel the unrelenting assault of the waves mingling with the taste of the salt on my tongue. I was going to die. I was sure of it. Either by not breathing in when I had the chance or by drowning from rainwater in my mouth whenever I screamed, and then I felt a tug. And my horror amplified tenfold as I imagined being in the jaws of a sea serpent about to pull me into the ocean depths. I thrashed desperately trying to escape, only to hear Greta's voice chastising me. "Stop that. I'm going to pull you in." Greta hoisted me onto the lifeboat, and once again, I was over the edge. I slipped the rest of my way in, landing in wet and bloody water. I could hear orders being shouted at me, but all I could do was curl up and wait, utterly useless. I know the others were preoccupied by something as they started rowing as hard as they could. In hindsight, I think they were trying to get clear of the whirlpool of the sinking ship. The storm passed almost as quickly as it arrived. The ocean wasn't as quick to calm, but the turbulence lessened to a manageable degree. When I was finally able to, I sat up and took inventory of my surroundings. I found myself in a lifeboat with 7 other crewmates. All that was left of the seaward Sarah were bubbles rising from the depths of the ocean. Miraculously, there was a second lifeboat paddling towards us, and once we connected, we were overjoyed to find that every single crew member had survived the capsizing. The captain, who was in the other raft, shouted over the water in a deep, booming voice. "We sent out a distress call before she went down. They have her coordinates. It won't be long." I hoped he was right because my hands were trembling from the cold and the quickly depleting adrenaline. We tied the rafts together, took stock of our supplies, food, first aid, and then waited. Now you could think that there'd be cheering when the light appeared on the horizon, that all hands would start to paddle and wave and to celebrate. Instead, there was a sudden and deathly silence as a communal swell of anxiety filtered into us. There were haunted expressions of Greta and John and Sarai and even the captain's face. The latter was holding the flare gun, but his finger was tapping nervously on the trigger. Sometimes, without knowing why, you get a bad feeling. People call it a sixth sense, but I think it's simpler than that. I think it's dangers perceived bypassed by the brain so you can act faster than you can think. Kind of like how you can actively analyze a person's body language to get more information than you'd get from hearing their words alone. But even if you're not trying to, you still subconsciously notice the little signs showing discomfort or anger or attraction. It's innate. What we think we would perceive is only scratching the surface of all the information we truly take in. The brain, our consciousness, focuses on one thing, but our survival instinct notices the other discrepancies. And when it does, it signals danger without telling you why. "It's not moving," Greta whispered. She hit the nail on the head. She connected the dots outlining the proverbial red flag. When she did, a sort of unspoken acknowledgement traveled through the group. As one by one, we noticed it too. You see, there were 2 problems with the light. 1, the nearest ship to ours was at least another 5 hours away, probably longer if they hit the same store we had. 2, the light was perfectly still, staying at the same height and never once bobbing along with the ocean surge. It also wasn't sweeping the ocean as one does when searching for survivors. You see, it had appeared way too fast, only about half an hour after the storm had passed. It was extremely unlikely that an unknown ship had been in the area. We all try to keep tabs on one another because, in such turbulent waters, knowing where everyone is a question of life and death. Yes, we're all technically all competing against one another, but you'd be hard-pressed to find another seaman unwilling to drop everything to save another in a pinch. There's a code of honor we all follow, but suppose this was an unknown vessel responding to our distress call. We still had to contend with the second issue of its unnatural immobility. My stomach contorted, wondering what it meant. This light was fixed on a single point in the near distance. It was glowing. No, pulsating. But it never once moved on any sort of axis like it should if it was searching for water. And it was immune to the push and pull of ocean waves. There's not a ship on Earth that can do that. The only reasonable explanation was it might be a Coast Guard helicopter hovering perfectly in place and dangerously low. But then again, even if it had been deployed the second the distress call was sent, a rescue chopper couldn't have gotten to us that fast. The light was impossible. The light felt menacing. The light acted like a lure, goading us to come into it. The boom of an explosion snapped me to reality, and it was followed by a crackle up above. The captain had fired off one of the flares. It hung in the air, slowly fizzling in a downward arc. I remember feeling so scared I dug my fingers into the lifeboat. The shot was one thing, but my fear had to do with the light. I was so afraid it would come closer now that I knew for sure where we were. I was more afraid of that light than I've ever been of anything in my life, but thankfully it stayed away. "Row!" the captain ordered. No one moved, not even to breathe. "Row, damn it!" John reached for the paddle, but Greta grabbed him by the forearm and stopped him, shaking her head. The captain glared at us with bulging eyes. He'd adopted an authoritative stance, but even he wasn't able to suppress his quakes of fear. If one followed logic, he was right. We should head towards the light. And yet, the longer we stared at the unwavering thing, the more it unsettled us. It's funny how something as simple as bobbing up and down could have alleviated our anxiety, but the light didn't do that. Not even once. Faced with a soft immunity, the captain grumbled and grabbed a paddle of his own. "Fine," he hissed. "I'll go. Any man or woman too cowardly to come can transfer to the coward's raft." He gestured to us. "Anyone with balls, come with me. We need to flag that ship down before it moves on without us." The flare hit the water and spat out a few more dying embers. I was surprised to see a few crewmates get up. John and a couple others transferred over to the captain's raft. An equal number transferred to the coward's raft. With contempt on his sour, sea-worn face, the captain cut the lines between us and directed his raft towards the searchlight. Even as they rowed off, we pleaded with them not to go, but it was like they'd been infected with bravado. I could hear them chanting in a rhythm, left, right, until they were just a blimp on the horizon. 10 minutes after the voices went quiet, at the estimated time the captain's raft would have reached the light, it suddenly blinked out of existence. The captain, John, and the other 5 crewmates on that raft were never seen or heard from again. The raft has never turned up. This, despite being outfitted with an emergency tracker. Planes equipped with the same tech have gone missing as well, so it could be that those trackers aren't worth much, but it still gives me nightmares to think, what would have happened to me if we'd followed the captain? As for us, it took 7 hours, but eventually we were rescued by the crew of the Rose Shannon. As expected, the storm had delayed rescue attempts. They warmed us up and combed the waters where we'd last seen the captain's raft, abandoning the search only when the Coast Guard arrived and took over. That night, I had nightmares of the light growing closer and closer, and every time its glow was about to hit me, I'd feel a pressure in my head like it was about to explode, and a searing, burning pain on my skin. Then I'd wake up and drenched in sweat. I now work as a trucker, a mercifully landlocked job. I drive through all kinds of creepy locations. I've seen some things on this job, but nothing has ever scared me more than the light I saw that terrible night. I don't know if it's because of the lack of closure around the captain's raft, or in my subconscious saw something that it felt my brain was better off not knowing. I don't know. I don't like to think about it, but now that I've written this, I think I can finally move on in a way. I still keep in touch with Greta. She's still working out there. Props to her for getting back on the Seahorse. She now captains her own vessel. I couldn't be happier for her. But sometimes when we're catching up, she talks about that night, and she always follows it up by saying another ship's been lost in that same area. I think they're up to 5 now. No survivors. Although the final transmission on one of the ships mentioned seeing a light on the horizon. Sailors have come to avoid what they're calling the Alaska Triangle. Part of me wishes I knew conclusively what's happening out there, but I'm mostly glad I'm here on solid ground, far from the light. If you live near the ocean, don't read this post, just to be safe. A friend sent me this email. I read it and made the decision to post it here. I'm sorry. I need you to post this everywhere, okay? Please, it'll make sense, I promise. My wife loves the ocean. We live by it, sort of. We live by a harbor that leads into the ocean, so we don't get to stare at nothing but water forever. My wife wanted a place by the ocean proper, but it freaked me out. I gave her a lot of excuses that were plausible, you know? What about the rising ocean levels because of climate change? We'll get flooded, and we'll lose the house if there's a really bad hurricane. That kind of thing. I didn't tell her it's because I think the ocean is absolutely fucking terrifying. Because she loves me, and she wants me to be happy. She wouldn't have moved here if she knew, but I love her too. And I wanted to see her happy without putting me first, so I thought getting a place tucked into a harbor would be a good compromise. We moved out here, where the salt air peels the paint off our shingles and the fog sweeps in, morning and evening. I'm usually okay with the harbor. I treat it like one big lake, a big salty lake that has seals sometimes. My wife was so much happier than before, so for a while it was worth it. She likes to walk along the beach, I don't like walking along the beach, so my wife usually goes alone. We were planning to get a dog so she could go on walks with it. I usually make dinner, so she goes while I'm cooking and returns in time for when it's ready. Last night she missed dinner. She's been late a couple of times, but usually she texts me. She knows I worry. She didn't text me, so I worried. After half an hour, I sucked it up and went looking for her. The fog was dense. I really got to stress that. You couldn't see 5 feet in front of you. It wasn't fully dark out yet, but the gray made the visibility even worse. I brought a flashlight and had my cell phone out and kept telling myself it was way too early to call the cops. I called for her a couple of times. Felicity! Felicity! Adrian! Hearing my own name in her voice made me want to burst out, and I just started running towards the sound. I almost slipped on the rocks on the beach, but she caught me. I was worried. I was so worried. Why didn't you text? I admit. I should have been more composed, but I wasn't really thinking straight. It ate my phone. I honestly wasn't sure what I expected to hear, but it's not that I thought she was joking with me, but I was very confused. What? She pointed, and through the fog I could see the shape of something. Like I mentioned, we sometimes get seals, but not walruses, which was my first thought when it was not nearly big enough to be a beached whale. Then I realized that it wasn't a walrus either. Its skin was super pale, like those animals that live in caves, almost translucent. I could see thick, dark veins even through the fog, but that was all about I could parse. I literally had no idea what I was looking at, which is basically what I said. The hell is that? I don't know, she said, and that's when I noticed how calm she sounded. Almost dreamlike. It was weird. She barely opened her mouth when she spoke. But I ate my phone when I tried to take a picture of it. Then I got into an argument with it, but it's fine now. For a second, I felt relieved that there were at least an explanation for why she didn't text, before the rest of that hit me square in the what the fuck. Thinking she might have a concussion or something, I tried to stay calm. What do you mean you got into an argument? At that second, a sound came from the thing. And the creepiest thing about it was how soft and sweet the sound was. It was this big, strange animal that barely moved in the fog, and it had opened its toothless mouth so wide my whole head could have fit in there. But the sound that came out of it wasn't some deep bellow. It was like a little child saying, "Ah," for the dentist. My wife turned to the thing and said, I know, I'm going to explain later. Can you explain over there? I tried to pull her away, but she wouldn't go. It doesn't want us to know it exists. There was a sudden squelching movement as something big and wet slapped the pavement, and the thing made a sound like a little squeak. I couldn't see it properly through the fog, but there was absolutely no way I was going to get any closer to it. I tried to whisper to her, but isn't that ship already sailed? Humans. It doesn't want humans to know it exists. It comes to shore to eat. Whenever we saw it, we tried to tell others. It began to eat those things too. It ate our drawings on bark and carvings in stone. It ate our woodcuts and inked maps. It ate our radio signals. It ate our photographs, so it ate my phone. To eat it right at the source. I decided to try and wrap my head around eating radio signals later when we were safe, so we don't tell anyone. Problem solved? No, because we'll remember. But if we die, it'll make humans suspicious. Others will search for it, like you searched for me. And it is full. It is so full. The thing made that humming noise, and I realized I recognized what it sounded like. It sounded like my wife doing baby talk. Honey, how do you know what it is? Because it ate my tongue, she said, simply and calmly. And I could see in the dim, misty light, her eyes wide with fear. It replaced it with one of its children. She opened her mouth wide, and for the first time I could see inside her mouth, and something slimy and pale was writhing in there. You won't tell anyone, right? You won't tell anyone about it? This was the only way it would let me walk away. You'll protect me, Adrian, right? You'll protect me. I took her home. We climbed into bed. She put on a mask, I think to make her feel better. I struggled to fall asleep, obviously. I thought about it for a long time. At that beach, in that fog, I meant what I said when I promised that thing I wouldn't tell anyone about it. I thought we could figure this out. We could learn sign language so she wouldn't have to use her mouth, but for those agonizing hours when I knew she was also wide awake beside me, my wonderful, lovely Felicity, infected with a parasite on the whims of that asshole from the deep. My fear and my shock transformed into full-on, bone-deep rage until even that exhausting. I did eventually pass out. When I woke up, it was noon. Our bed was damp and there were water droplets all over the floor. My wife is not in the house. I don't know when she'll be back. I don't think I'm going to be able to do this. I think she's alive, but I think she's being held hostage. As long as that thing is alive, my wife and I will be prisoners. Now, at this point, you might be wondering why I'm sending you this. Maybe it'll eat the internet too, but I don't think so. She said it was already full. I think the only reason I still have my tongue is because it was too full to eat it too. I'm calling its bluff. I know it's selfish to risk, but I am not going to let that thing get away with what it did to Felicity. I'm terrified, but I am not going to let my fear rule me. After I send you this, I'm going to find my wife, rip that tongue out of her, and then kill that thing. But I need you to keep it distracted. So post this for me, okay? Spread the word. Overwhelm it. Wish me luck. There's a reason NASA stopped exploring the deep sea. I'm a former NASA scientific researcher. My division was in charge of studying deep sea life, both fauna and flora, in the world's oceans. Here are some facts. 70% of the world is ocean. The deepest part of the ocean is not the Mariana Trench. There's tons of underwater cave systems further down, some quite large. We have not identified every life form down there. Knowing these, let me tell you why NASA fired me and a small team of fellow researchers from the Oceanographic Division, hired completely new personnel, and switched to space exploration. In their defense, I had no interest in continuing my research. Before I begin, I want to say that most of the division actually did study underwater life forms to varying degrees, but most researchers were not involved with the life forms that my team investigated. Therefore, no information about these vents has ever been released to the public, at least to my knowledge. I'm purposely going anonymous here for many reasons, as the US government would prefer to keep this out of the public eye, and people have disappeared for far less in my profession. On an off note, it's deeply tragic what happened recently with the submarine that imploded. I think I'm correct in my suspicion on what caused it, of course, but it's not what the public was told. Anyway, I will now detail a few incidents that I think the public needs to be aware of. Case Study 1. Montexera Oil Rig Diving Incident. I was involved with a study that was sanctioned between NASA and a private corporation to investigate an unknown anomaly. Metal parts at the bottom of the rig had taken damage from an unknown source, and a dive team of 3 was sanctioned to investigate it. The dive did not go well. Something we had never seen before was down there with the divers. We don't know much about it, but I can tell you what we do know now. It resembles an extremely intelligent class of giant cephalopods, more intelligent than any other sea creature ever encountered. They are strong and carnivorous and extremely large. It's theorized that purposely damaged the rig to lure humans deep down. It's unknown what they normally eat, or why they sometimes decide to target humans, but it is clear that they will not hesitate to eat us. The 3 divers that were attacked had little means to defend themselves. These cephalopods worked in unison, with an extreme understanding of human equipment. One cephalopod moved a diver's air tank from his back, while another removed his fins. Their tentacles have extreme suction and can attach to any object. Dive knives did not appear to damage their bodies, where in the past divers have been able to fight off Humboldt squids and other cephalopods with them. A second diver was choked by the cephalopod from behind as another created a distracting light display with its body, showing they had an understanding of how humans breathe. Note, they can flash and take on any color as it suits them, unlike other squids, but normally they resemble a black-blue color, which is almost imperceptible at the deep depths that they live, and explains in parts how they are able to avoid discovery. Of course, none of us saw them coming in the research vessel up top, and it was too late to warn anyone. The 2 divers who were attacked perished, and we can only assume they were likely consumed. Amazingly, the 3rd diver was able to use an underwater flare to escape and report back the events in detail. As it stands, fire is this life form's only known weakness. Case Study 2. USS Cyclops missing ship log recovery. What began as a normal shipwreck investigation has arguably become one of the biggest cover-ups in history. The ship's location has not been released to the public, and I agree that it should be kept secret. The beings that took this ship down should be avoided at all costs. To this day, the public does not know anything other than that a US ship disappeared. Perhaps these creatures can be blamed for other missing ships, though we cannot prove that. The ship had a log that detailed the same beings encountered at the Montserrat oil rig, black, blue, giant squid resembling entities that work in teams and can use tools of human creation. These cephalopods engaged the ship at night in a surprise attack and damaged it beyond repair. They dragged down survivors, including many from atop lifeboats using their tentacles. They left no trace of their encounter. They are clearly incredibly strong and can easily hold humans underwater, drowning them. There's a theory that they may even derive pleasure in killing, shown by them flashing certain patterns on their bodies immediately upon the taking of a life. Although this is still just a theory. There are other incidents that I won't get into here. I don't intend to scare people by bringing this information to light. But I do think that divers and people who are interested in using submersibles to investigate the deep sea need to be warned. These creatures normally stay in very, very deep water, and there's only a few incidents of human interaction. For a common person, they generally pose no threat. While extremely intelligent, they have not shown the ability to create tools, only to use those which humans have made. It is likely that they only go after humans when they are unable to find sufficient food sources in their own environments. We believe them to just be another species of giant squid, albeit an extremely intelligent one. I cannot understand why our government is hiding their existence, as they are just natural sea predators like sharks and orca whales, but whatever the reason, remember this: humans are not the top predators in the deep ocean. Naturally, NASA has chosen to avoid further exploration of the deep sea, for now, to avoid contact with these creatures until the proper measures are put in place. 95% of the ocean remains unexplored. It may be difficult to wrap your head around, but it's true. Despite all the species we've discovered, the depths we have dived, and the waves we have sailed, the ocean is still largely alien to the human race. Considering it covers 96.5% of the Earth's surface, this figure can become terrifying if you think about it for too long. Imagine this: if only a tiny portion of the ocean has been explored, then what else is there to discover? What creatures have evaded us? What secrets remain unearthed? Will we ever truly understand any of it? What sacrifices will be made in the name of knowledge? How far will we go? While the vastness and mystery of the ocean is terrifying to some, for others it fuels an intense curiosity. I was one of those people. Both my parents were marine biologists, and they taught me that the ocean was something to marvel at, not fear. There was a time when I considered becoming a marine biologist myself, but I hadn't inherited my parents' strong academic drive, so I decided that I would become a professional diver. My parents were supportive of this dream, but insisted I attend college so that I would have something to fall back on. I graduated in 2006 at the age of 21, got a job as a secretary, and immediately enrolled in a training program for divers and obtained my certification. I was, as my mother would put it, over the moon. After a couple of years spent scraping together enough work experience, I was offered a job with an organization that specializes in marine salvaging. I quit my secretary job and devoted myself entirely to diving. It was physically taxing, sometimes dangerous work, but I loved it and wanted to continue diving until the day I died. In January of 2013, a freak storm caused a cargo ship to sink in the North Pacific Ocean, many miles from land. My team was sent out to salvage what we could. I distinctively remember how cold it was that morning, the gray sea and sky blending together in a bleak, murky mess. The waves were rough that day, and the wind felt like razor blades against my skin. We reached the shipwreck site and sprang into action, gearing up and diving in, braving the cold. As I sank below the surface like I had done countless times before, I was unnerved at how dark it was, how heavy the water felt, bearing down on my back like a hydraulic press. I normally relished every minute I got to spend in the ocean, but today I was nervous, as if my gut knew something my mind hadn't yet registered. As I went deeper, the pressure became almost unbearable. I wanted to make for the surface, but my limbs felt cemented in place. I could hardly breathe, and the realization that I was drowning hit me like a freight train. How did this make any sense? I was a professional, for Christ's sake. Where was my team? Hadn't they noticed I was in trouble? I opened my mouth to scream, unleashing a torrent of bubbles. My chest filled with water, and I lost consciousness. When I opened my eyes again, I was still underwater, except it was no longer dark. I appeared to be floating in an otherworldly blue light that pulsed as if alive. The familiar, comforting weight of my tank was gone, as was my wetsuit. I was completely naked. The fact that I could breathe made me think I must be trapped in some kind of air bubble. What the fuck was going on? "Hello?" I called. My voice sounded muted and strange this deep down. "Anyone?" I looked down and what I saw amazed me. I was hovering above a group of humanoid sculptures, arranged in a circle. There were about 9 or 10 of them in total, carved from some kind of gray stone decorated with barnacles and seaweed. The sight was so bizarre that, for a moment, I forgot about my situation and marveled at the sight. I had to get closer. I wanted to see those statues up close. I wanted to touch them. I didn't know why, but the lure they had over me was powerful. They were the moon, and I was the ocean tide, bound to them by a powerful force nothing else could replicate. I kicked and paddled, and slowly the air bubble began to sink. Down, down, and down. I landed in the middle of the circle, now dwarfed by the statues, all of which stood about 7 feet tall. I let out a tiny gasp when I saw that they had no faces, just smooth surfaces. It made my skin crawl, yet I couldn't bring myself to look away. "Beautiful, aren't they?" The voice was deep and rumbling, intimidating yet soothing. It was how I imagined the ancient Greek god of thunder would sound. I whirled around frantically, but saw nothing. "Look down, child." I looked down and screamed. A massive eye about 10 feet wide peered up at me. It was eerily human-like, with a giant black pupil in the middle of a vivid green iris. It darted around, following my every move, like some colossal security camera. "Fear not, child." "What are you?" I shrieked. "Where am I? What are these?" I gestured wildly at the statues. "Things. What is going on?" "Silence, child. I understand that you have many questions, but you must remain calm." "Stop calling me that," I yelled, my panic and confusion spilling out in a form of anger. "I'm 28 years old. You are a child to me. I've been around since the dawn of man. I was here before you were born, and I will remain long after you die." "Good to know," I snapped. "Now, will you tell me where the fuck I am?" If the entity found my language offensive, it didn't let on. "You are at the bottom of the ocean, child." "Who are you?" The creature laughed. "I have been called a great many things. People have called me God, monster, abomination, a being from another dimension. I assure you, I am none of these things. I truly am one of a kind." "Do you have a name?" "Not in the traditional sense. I suppose you can call me King. I'm the ruler of the ocean, after all." "Okay, King. Why am I here?" "Well, child, you wandered unknowingly into my realm. How, I do not know, but it doesn't matter. Still, I'm curious as to what you're doing so deep in the ocean." "I'm a diver. We were on a salvaging mission." "I see. So you were trying to reclaim what these vast waters have already taken?" There was a note of bitterness to the voice that made me pause. What? "The ship you had been sent to salvage, it belonged to the ocean. It belonged to me. Every ship that sails into a storm, every man who is swallowed by the waves, never to be seen again. It belongs to me. You have no right to take it." I felt like a misbehaving toddler being reprimanded by a parent. The statues, despite their lack of features, seemed to be staring down at me with disapproval. "I don't understand," I said. "Of course you don't. No one does. You humans don't give the ocean the care and respect she deserves. Sure, there have been tribes who worshipped her as a sacred entity, people who fight to preserve the animals, fish, and plants who call the ocean home. However, there are those who pollute the ocean, kill her creatures, and make it impossible for me to care for her properly." The eye had now gone dull with deep anguish and despair, and my heart twisted inside my chest. I'm sorry." A heavy sigh rumbled across the ocean floor, shaking the air bubble and nearly knocking me off my feet. "Allow me to show you something, child." With a blinding flash of blue light, the statues and eyeball vanished, and once again I was in the dark, curled in the fetal position and shivering violently. A vision crept into my head, vivid and colorful and as real as anything I'd ever seen. A coral reef, brimming with fish in every color of the rainbow. Among them were species I didn't recognize, species that seemed almost alien. It was like a living, breathing, swimming painting. beautiful and full of life. Flash. A giant sea turtle in jewel shades of green, its paddle-like fins sending ripples across the water. Flash. A drowned passenger ship slowly disintegrating, covered in barnacles, tragic, morbid, and yet so beautiful. Flash. A marble tablet etched with archaic-looking ruins, half buried in grainy, pebbly sand. Flash. The ruins of an underwater city, an expanse of stone temples, towers, and pyramids, of obelisks, spires, and even more of those faceless statues, long abandoned and silent as a grave. Flash. Back where I started, with the eye staring expectantly at me. What you have seen is what remains untouched of the ocean. I don't understand, I wept. The beauty of what he'd shown me had brought me to tears. What can I do? Don't tell anyone what you have witnessed today. The eye closed. The air bubble popped and I was alone. I don't remember the rescue. I don't remember being brought onto the boat or coughing up buckets of water. I don't remember the helicopter ride to the hospital. All I remember is waking up to the white hospital walls. I kept my promise to King. When they asked me what had happened, I told them I didn't remember. I drew elaborate sketches of what I'd seen before tearing them up and throwing them away. I continued to dive, but with less sense of adventure. I was more cautious, more aware of the things I couldn't understand. Time went on, and my memories grew fade at the edges, but never faded. There were times when I questioned my own sanity, if what I'd seen had just been one long crazy dream. I had no way to verify what had happened except for my memories, and so I held on to them as tightly as I could. Even as the months turned to years, I married, I birthed a child, I moved on with my life. The world shifted and warped around me, ever changing, ever evolving. The ocean, which covers 96.5% of the Earth, is 95% unexplored. Despite all the species we have discovered, the depths we have dived, and the waves we have sailed, the ocean is still largely alien to the human race. There's so much we don't know, secrets that remain unearthed, and people with curiosity that can't be quenched. There are those who know earth-shaking truths, but for the sake of preserving something so amazing, never divulge them. 95% of the ocean remains unexplored, and that is just fine by me. Has anybody heard of the ocean conspiracies? Now, I'm nobody special, but my uncle on my mother's side is. I've only met him a handful of times, but he was nice enough from what I can remember. Not terribly memorable, though. When I was younger, I never really knew what he actually did in terms of employment. My mother told me that he worked for the government. That's also what he told me himself. Really nothing beyond that. This wasn't really a cause of concern in my life. I mean, why should I have cared? I only started thinking about it after he disappeared. He stopped coming over for holidays, and my Skype conversations with him ceased completely. I went to my mother for answers, obviously, but she just said that he relocated. I was 16 at this point and smart enough to realize that this blatant non-answer from her meant she wasn't going to talk about it. I started thinking that the worst had happened, that he'd been in an accident or something, and that my mother was grieving. But nobody else seemed to be talking about him. My dad and him were never particularly close, but you'd think that he'd say something about it, right? In any case, I kind of forced myself to push this into the back of my head. If he really was gone, then I guess I'd have to move on. I wasn't terribly close with him either, after all. But then something happened a few months afterwards. It was around midnight, and being the slacker that I am, was up writing a paper for school. I took out my headphones and got up to use the washroom when I heard voices coming from downstairs. I assumed it was my parents, but upon listening closer, the male voice was not my dad. It was my uncle. It sounded like he was arguing with my mom about something, but trying to keep it as quiet as possible. I listened closer and began making out sentence fragments. Stuff like, "I have to go," and "They don't know how to fix it. I wasn't supposed to know." I kept hearing one word sprinkled in throughout the entire duration, which he was always talking about. Ocean. I considered going down and seeing what was happening, but he left before I could make the decision. I heard him storm out of the house and start his car before speeding off. I really did want to mention to my mom that following morning, but she was acting like nothing had even fucking happened. Obviously, there was some sketchy shit going on here. But did I really want to know? At the time, my answer was no. I still had my own life to live after all. If this was a rabbit hole that I didn't have to go down, then I wasn't going to. Fast forward 8 years and I've moved out, landed a software development job and living by myself in the city. I hadn't really thought about my uncle's sins. I mean, it was kind of weird that nobody brought him up during the subsequent family gatherings, but again, fuck that rabbit hole. However, I think I've changed my tune on that. It was a Thursday night and I was browsing the internet. I started off with Reddit, YouTube, etc., before launching Tor to see if there was anything more interesting on the deep or dark web. I didn't find anything particularly noteworthy until I stumbled upon some forum where they were discussing a multitude of topics ranging from paranormal encounters to government conspiracies. There was one thread that caught my attention. Weird shit going on in the ocean. The ocean. Memories of my uncle flashed through my eyes. I had to read it. The basic gist of the discussion went something like this. The original poster had a brother with some vague government job who had gone missing recently. The night before, the brother showed up at their door incredibly frantic and mostly incoherent. He was droning on about something related to the ocean. Problem was, his speech was so fragmented that the OP couldn't scrape together any cogent meaning. Abruptly, he apologized before running off, leaving the OP stunned. His attempts to get into contact with his brother afterwards yielded nothing. He was a ghost. The only thing that the brother had given him was a thick set of paper documents that had been burned to the point of falling apart upon the slightest touch. He could only make out the first page, which simply had the words, Ocean Conspiracies. Test Site CKX9 Analysis. The comments were filled with people either calling his bluff, pretending to be government agents, or making theories. A few of the comments that I distinctively remember were these. Sorry for the offensive language if you care. I didn't write this. Quote, none of you fucking F-slur better talk about this on the normie sites. They know what you're searching up. They know what you post. Whatever you post it, mention anything about these ocean conspiracies, they'll come after you. But here was the reply to the comment above. Just shows that you people literally don't know what's going on out here. People know about it. Not a lot, but they're out there. They don't give a shit about outsiders trying to search. They won't find anything. The only thing they care about are people who know about it and can prove what's going on, like OP's brother probably was. What followed were a bunch of people asking him about how he knew, and these were his replies. Look, I never was high clearance, so I only know bare bones surface level shit. There's something going on in the Arctic and Pacific Oceans. Something weird, maybe the Indian as well. Although I didn't have confirmation on that. Hell, I don't have confirmation for any of this. It might all be a diversion. I've even heard rumors that it's only in the Dead Sea, but it's not just one thing. It's a bunch of shit that seems to be isolated, which worries them. They usually take place in the middle of nowhere, but there's been incidents near coastlines as well. What's going on? I don't know exactly. Like I said, bare bones. The fact that I'm aware something's going on at all makes me a liability. Even more because I don't work there anymore. Of course they're still tracking me, but I'm pretty sure that they can't track this. I'll tell you about what I've heard though. One of the biggest things is that the government has very limited control here. They can't always predict or contain whatever is going on. Also, calling them ocean conspiracies is likely a diversion tactic. They're not really conspiracy theories if they're actually happening, right? They know this. They know what they're doing. Ignorance is bliss. There was a drilling project under the code name Heaven out in some remote part of the Pacific. I'm not sure what they were drilling for or if any drilling even happened at all, but I've been told that the water's shallow over there, like waist level shallow. That's the issue. The geography doesn't make sense. One second there's an infinite blackness below and then suddenly you're standing on the surface. There's something wrong with that surface, I assume, but nobody ever found out what. The rig was decimated after a week like an invisible fucking meteor had crashed into it or something. No surviving accounts. I heard this one from a freighter crew member. Apparently, he saw what they refer to as the aqua arachnids, giant spider-like things that walk on the water surface. The worst thing about them is their heads. They look to be wrapped in some kind of wet gauze, but their eyes can be seen through it. They're definitely human eyes. Alright, I really dislike talking about this shit, so I'll leave it off with this. Something that happened at a beach resort in Mexico. A mother's watching her kid splash around in shallow water near the shore. No danger there, right? Suddenly it looks as if the child gets pulled under, but it doesn't make any sense. The water was only up to her knees, but she disappears completely. The mother starts running towards where her child was, but she pops back up mere seconds later. Somewhat phased at first, she simply starts splashing around again like nothing ever happened. However, there was a black marking on her arm that wasn't there before, a triangle with a square in it. Not cut like a scar, but like a permanent tattoo. I'm thinking that this one has to be related to the drilling rig. Look, there's a bunch of other shit that I'll post if I think I can get away with it, and if I feel like it. His comments ended there, but I've been monitoring this users for updates ever since. I've considered messaging him personally, but that's tentative net for now. Not until I can get a better sense of what's going on here. Obviously, the OP's story about his brother kind of creeped me out, eerily resembling what happened with me and my uncle. I've been thinking about it some more. After he ran away, we did get a lot of friends of his coming by. Almost always while I was home alone. I'm also not sure if I've been seeing indistinct men in suits at a higher rate than I should be. I just never paid attention to any of them. There's also this guy at my office who's been trying to hang out with me after work, but I've stared at his screen before. He's just typing gibberish. Maybe I've been in this rabbit hole for longer than I've known. What did my uncle do? What is going on in the ocean? And alright guys, that wraps up Scary Ocean Stories. And let me know down in the comments below, would you like to see more videos kind of similar like this? Like, would you like to see more ocean scary stories, or would you like to see space scary stories, or woods scary stories, or, you know, anything? Just let me know down in the comments below what you'd like to see. Anything. Just comment it down below. I read basically every single comment, so yeah, just comment whatever you'd like. And please like the video. It helps out the channel a ton, and subscribe to the channel as well. It means the world. And thank you so much for watching all the way to the end. W. And anyways, without further ado, see ya.